Tonight on Reel to Reel, we'll see how the 80s are affecting Catholic schools.
We'll travel to St. Joseph's University to meet Lieutenant Colonel Alice Emanuel.
Mike Gallagher reviews the movies Country and Places in the Heart.
We'll meet a Canadian artist with a gift for the Pope.
And Father Tom Legere discusses crossroads in our lives. Hello, I'm Isabel Garvey-LaGrosse.
And I'm Father Dave McGowan. Welcome to Reel to Reel. Those of us who have graduated from Catholic schools can readily appreciate the quality of the education we've received. But it's dangerous to take these schools for granted.
And most of us assume that despite the economic difficulties they may face, Catholic schools will survive because they are part of the Catholic Church. But will they?
All right, now we are following on the F8
In order to produce
sound.
excellence
Again,
or to have
okay?
quality
Ready?
education in the Catholic schools,
All right.
it's a philosophy you have to start out with.
Very good. Carlos, I want to hear it again.
Why do some schools, why are they successful whereas others aren't? I think it gets down to some talk a good game, but they don't play it. Catholic doesn't automatically mean good.
Today, in the mid-1980s, Catholic schools in the United States are fighting for their existence. The network of parochial schools around the country, after almost 100 years of steady growth, is now shrinking, losing schools at the rate of 70 a year. In the last 2 decades, 27% of the country's Catholic grade schools and 40% of the high schools have been forced to close. They have been squeezed between declining enrollment and increasing costs. But even as so many Catholic schools are losing the battle to survive, there are some schools that are fighting back, and they are winning. One such school is DeMatha Catholic Boys High School in Hyattsville, Maryland. Already legendary for its excellent athletic program, DeMatha was recently named by the Reagan administration as one of the 60 best private academic schools in the country. Another success story is the parochial school system of the Diocese of Galveston-Houston, which enrolls over 20,000 students. Their average SAT scores are at least 1 year above the national average in every subject. What lessons can be learned from these schools? What is their strategy for success? It begins, says DeMatha Principal John Moylan, with the teacher.
The primary asset needed by a school to be successful is an outstanding faculty. Teaching is a very difficult profession. If you don't do it well, kids are going to go home and tell their parents, I didn't learn anything today.
But how can Catholic schools attract good teachers when they only pay them 60% of what they could make in public schools? Sister Colleen Hennessy, the superintendent of schools for the Diocese of Galveston-Houston, admits that this can be a big problem.
So we have to let them feel teaching in a Catholic school is a privilege, that we really want the best because we expect the best.
Though they don't expect the best when it comes to salaries, some teachers feel that Catholic schools could at least do better. Sarah Menke-Fish taught at 2 Catholic high schools in Iowa.
It's a simple fact. The honor of teaching in a Catholic school doesn't pay the bills. I feel school boards and parents are going to have to realize that if they want to keep excellent school teachers in the Catholic schools, they're going to have to start paying equal to what public school teachers make. I believe excellent teachers continue to teach in the Catholic school systems for less money because of administrative, parental, and student support for what they're doing, teaching, instead of being babysitters or disciplinarians.
Most of DeMatha's teachers have taught here 8 years or more. Charles Offit, the head of the English department, has been teaching here for 30 years.
We have an excellent school. I think that you can't talk about it as much as you can watch it. I think you walk around the halls, you look in the classroom, you watch what's happening with the kids, you watch the teachers say, hey, have a good weekend.
I think DeMatha is the best example you have that facilities don't make a program, that people make a program. Our basketball team is one of the strongest in the country, and we play in a very modest gymnasium, or practice in a very modest gymnasium. We have the #1 Catholic high school band in the country, and they have been for the last 4 out of the last 5 years, and yet they rehearse and do all their work out of temporary buildings that we've rebuilt.
Once you've got the teachers, says Moylan, then you balance encouragement with discipline.
Do your best, that's all we ask. Here we go. Some of you obviously are working on this, some of you are not working enough on this. Beginning. There we go. 1, 2, ready.
There has to be a certain atmosphere in the building that everybody there knows we're here for business and we're here to learn.
For her ability to inspire excellence in her schools, Sister Colleen Hennessy was recently selected out of a field of 300,000 working school executives as one of the top 100 executive educators in the country.
It is my belief that if we want the children in a classroom to succeed, we have to let them know we want them to succeed, and we believe that they can succeed.
Parochial schools have traditionally banked their reputations on their ability to deliver the meat and potatoes of education, the fundamentals. Now, many of the best schools also recognize the importance of self-esteem and emotions.
These children are putting on the play 12 Angry Men. The play is about 12 jurors, one of which votes not guilty, and the rest of them vote guilty. And they go through the emotions to where at the end of the play, it's the exact opposite. One is voting guilty and the rest are voting not guilty. And I'm doing this in the gifted class because it shows them how to analyze and evaluate the emotions that each person goes through to come to a certain conclusion.
DeMatha Sr. John Martin recognizes that the best education is also up to date.
It's important for me to learn computers because the world's heading towards a more high-tech attitude towards everything. And I think that the more everyone knows about computers and how to use them, I think everyone will be better off.
We want to look at computers as tools. Many parents feel that if a student is computer educated, he's economically safe forever. That's a myth. They need a sound education in all areas.
These schools specifically include that most vital area of all, faith.
Well, I think the underlying philosophy behind everything that happens in the school is that there's a value system that's important in people's lives, that you have to develop a sense of morality, you have to develop humanistic goals, and behind all of that is the Catholic religion in this school.
When you come into a Catholic school, I like to feel, well, God's here, and we're really going to have a great time today, and we're all going to do well.
So now the package of excellence is complete. Committed teachers, an atmosphere of discipline and honest encouragement, nationally recognized academic and athletic programs, all served up within the context of Christian values. All of the challenges have been met. The struggle is over, right? Wrong. Perhaps the biggest challenge lies ahead, and that is to keep the package at a price that people can afford. At this time, DeMatha costs almost $2,000 a year.
The cost factors are getting to be very scary. The private schools could be put right out of existence if the costs get too high for the general public.
In the meantime, it might be good to remember what Will Rogers said. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
There's more coming up on Reel to Reel. When we come back, we'll meet Lieutenant Colonel Alice Emanuel.
And Father Tom Legere talks to us about the value of letting go. So stay with us. We've all heard the slogan, the Marines are looking for a few good men. Well, the Marines can keep the men. We recently traveled to St. Joseph's University to meet an outstanding female officer in the United States Air Force. We are at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for the weekly training session of Air Force ROTC cadets.
Warriors are the way to go.
On college campuses throughout the country, you will find other young men and women training in programs that are virtually identical to the one which you are now watching.
To the test, 'cause warriors are the very best.
But here at St. Joseph's, there is one very notable difference.
Count cadence, delayed cadence, count U.S. cadence, count.
Meet Lieutenant Colonel Alice Emanuel, the commanding officer of St. Joseph's Air Force ROTC, and the only female in the country to hold such a position. After a 26-year career in the Air Force and tours of duty that have taken her from the Deep South to the Far East, Lieutenant Colonel Emanuel is now responsible for training cadets from the 12 colleges in the Delaware Valley who participate in the ROTC program at St. Joseph's. Lieutenant Colonel, why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, having come from a small town in western Pennsylvania, I was looking for excitement and adventure and travel because I really hadn't moved out of those hills just yet, hadn't really seen too much of the world. So that was my way of just leaving and finding something new.
Not only something new, but something challenging as well. We asked the Lieutenant Colonel how she has met the challenge of being a woman in a traditionally male domain.
And as I've progressed throughout my career, I'm very comfortable in the military. And with all the jobs I've had, they've all been challenges, and so I've worked very hard at them. But I've never felt, closed in or not being able to expand. I've been very fortunate in my career. We have enough women within the Corps who hold responsible position within the Cadet Corps, and they're respected. So for the youngsters in ROTC today, that's a way of life. And it's exciting to me because I still meet people who we say are very traditional, or the old brown shoe day when women were not a part, a fully integrated part of the military. But one does not find that today, and the mindset of the 18 to 22-year-old is not that of 20 years ago.
Well, having a female CO is, I don't think, any different from having women in the Air Force. The way that the Air Force is structured now, they're picked on their abilities. So having a woman in a job versus having her as your CO makes no difference. If they're qualified to do the job, they should be there.
Lieutenant Colonel Emanuel is no tougher than any other Air Force officer we have, which isn't saying she isn't tough, but she doesn't have to prove herself as a tough commander because she's a woman. We respect her because, as an Air Force officer.
I find it extremely encouraging to see a woman in a position of high command, Lieutenant Colonel Emanuel being the prime example for me. There aren't a whole lot of women in the Air Force just due to the nature of the job, and she does an outstanding job. I think she provides great leadership for all of us, as well as a good example, but she's a woman through and through.
Teacher, counselor, disciplinarian, role model. All are the duties of a military officer and a mother. While stationed in Korea in 1978, Alice Emanuel adopted 3 children, Maria, Matt, who is deaf, and John.
There came a time in my life that I knew that I had to reach out and do something bigger than myself, if you will. And so in sharing that and having gone to Korea then and seeing such great need, and it was really a spiritual conversion within me that I put things in priority so that really career and travel and those kinds of things are not all that important to me anymore, that I would much prefer to meld and mold and help someone else do that. So I see my role as a mother now, doing that, of course, with the children. But they brought so much joy to my life, and you're right, they turned my lifestyle around 180 degrees.
As a working mother myself, I have to ask you this. How do you do it all?
I really don't, and I'll tell you why. There is so much to be done here And when I'm here, I think perhaps I need to be home with the children. And that's usually when they're home from school. And so there is that tug. But yet I know if I had not adopted them, they wouldn't have the advantages that they have now. So there are some trade-offs. So I had to resolve that within my own mind. But even then, I'm still not the superwoman that a lot of people think I am, because at times things don't go right. And that's when that inner strength that we talked about earlier comes. And for instance, when I'm driving to work in the morning, I often will say, okay, Lord, they're yours. Wow. And so when that happens, I forget it, because I know he's going to take care of them. And he gives me the time to do both. And I know that. So I feel that the inner strength comes there. I've just been able to balance it a little bit better than perhaps some other people. So I have to learn to prioritize things, if you will, both here and at home. And I feel that I've been pretty successful with that. But I would not be able to do that if I didn't have that kind of personal faith or deep relationship with our God, because it just would not happen. I have to think ahead in what is this person going to be like for the future? What is my child going to be like in the future? I want that kind of value system established now. It's an exciting time to be alive. There are more women pilots, for instance. One day I'm hoping they'll pilot the spacecraft. So to me, the opportunities are unlimited. It's just they can go as high as they want to go, as long as they're willing to work and be dedicated and make some sacrifices along the way.
We'd like to congratulate Lieutenant Colonel Alice Emanuel on her promotion to full colonel. And now let's join Father Tom Legere for tonight's relationships.
Greetings in the Lord. Have you ever had the following dream? You dream that you are falling and falling and falling through space. Well, that dream means one of two things. Either it means that we are out of control in our lives, or it means that we need to get out of control in our lives. Now that comes as a surprise to most of us who have been led to believe that being in control is one of the supreme values. But the fact of the matter is, we never get anywhere spiritually until we learn to let go. Now that is extremely threatening to most of us, for the simple reason that we recognize we are going to have to pay a price. We come to a crossroads in our lives, and we then have to choose the path that is either wide, or we have to choose the road that is less traveled. And that can lead us to a sense of panic, because we're not really sure that we can handle it ourselves. And of course, we can't handle it ourselves. At a time like that, we are ready for God. And so in our vulnerability, we then reach out to Jesus, who becomes for us the way and the truth and the life. Following his path, and his path alone, can really lead us to the fullness of the joys of the kingdom within. Now, of course, we can try to do it without Christ. And we may be lucky, just like some people can find their way out of the woods without a path. Maybe some people will perhaps be able to find some meaning in their life without Christ. But since his way has worked for 2,000 years, and since he is the supreme teacher who can lead us to the fullness of the kingdom within, why not trust him? Because if we follow Christ as our Lord and Savior, he can lead us to become fully human and fully alive.
We're going to break away again, but when we come back, Mike Gallagher will join us for Arts Review.
And we'll take a trip up north with a gift for the Pope. Stay with us. It's hard enough for Mike Gallagher to find one movie he likes, but when he finds two he likes, that's a special occasion.
Hello, I'm Mike Gallagher. The entertainment media have been contributing their fair share to the pressure the American family has been feeling in recent times, permeated as the media are by a hip sophistication that normally either mocks or ignores values precious to the family. So I think it's gratifying then to see two films like Country and Places in the Heart come along. Now I've got to confess right off that I might not be as objective as I should be here, especially with regard to the Iowa set Country. For one of my most vivid memories is of an evening more than 30 years ago when I was driving a team of horses down an Iowa road just at sunset, lush, fertile fields to either side of me. I had hitchhiked out west from Cleveland at the beginning of the summer, and now my hands were callous from wielding a pitchfork all day as a member of a threshing crew. And so I felt, and I still feel, a special tie to the land and the people I had been privileged to get to know. In Places in the Heart, writer-director Robert Benton too looks back. It's his celebration of his past, irrevocably bound to Waxahachie, Texas. It's not exactly the past as it was, but rather the past as remembered, the past as altered in the service of a deeper truth. Edna Spaulding, Sally Field, sees her husband, the local sheriff, get up from his Sunday dinner in answer to an urgent knock at the door. Within the hour, his deputies carry him back, shot through the heart by a young black man, too drunk to know what he was doing. Life changes at once for Edna and her two young children. She's almost overcome by a sense of helplessness. But then, when an unctuous self-serving banker all but orders her to sell her farm to avoid foreclosure, Edna gets mad, righteously so, and she determines to stand her ground. There may be a golden glow over the events and Places in the Heart, but Country is set in the present. Instead of mellowness, we have the harsh, pale sunlight of an Iowa winter. Gil and Jewel Ivy, Sam Shepard and Jessica Lang, are a hard-working farm couple with 3 children. The farm has been in Jewel's family for a century. All seems well with the Ivies, but then the crisis that always seemed just over the horizon suddenly breaks. The government bureaucrats in town, anxious about their own careers, demand an accounting from Gil. How does he intend to keep up the payments on the massive loans? Loans which these same bureaucrats urged on him a few years before. Gil caves in under the pressure, his pride shattered, his confidence as a father and provider gone. He starts to drink and turns mean and abusive. Jewel, however, is made of sterner stuff. Besides, Jessica Lang is the producer here. She puts heart into her distraught children and embarks on a campaign to rally her neighbors' support. She stops the auction the bureaucrats have forced Gil to acquiesce to. One of Country's merits is that it tackles an issue that, despite its gravity, is an issue that most of the rest of America is blissfully unaware of. The plight of the American farmer in supposedly prosperous times. Now, neither film is perfect. Everybody's a shade too nice in Places in the Heart, and everything falls into place much too neatly, whereas Country errs in the opposite direction. It has some loose ends, and it's all too obvious that Gil's sudden collapse stems not from anything in his character as we know it, but from the need to turn Jewel into a populist hero. But whatever their faults, both films are remarkable accomplishments, and I recommend them highly. Because of a restrained bedroom scene in both films, however, and because of a humorous incident in Country involving a contraceptive, they're not for preteens. I'm Mike Gallagher for Arts Review.
Now let's travel north to meet a Canadian artist who has a very special gift.
This is Midland, Ontario, a typical Canadian city located some 90 miles north of Toronto. Midland stands on the shores of beautiful Georgian Bay, making tourism a major industry here. Meet Ron Hunt, a typical Canadian. Ron likes to spend time at home with his wife Mary and the kids. In his free time, he dabbles in wood carving, a favorite hobby of his. At work, he's the advertising manager for Waltech Industries, a sinkware manufacturer. From all first impressions, Ron is just an average down-home kind of guy. But Ron Hunt is not your typical Canadian, and 1984 is no typical year for Midland, Ontario. When the 1984 papal visit to Canada was announced, word came that John Paul II would visit Midland, and Ron Hunt was commissioned by the local Jesuit fathers to carve a sculpture gift for the pontiff to commemorate his trip to Canada.
The father said, well, Ron, we would like you to do the carving, the official gift for the Pope. He could have knocked me over with a straw just then. Anyhow, the scene for the carving is set near the steps of the present-day Martyr Shrine, and that's on a high hill overlooking the Wye Valley. St. Marie among the Hurons, the reconstruction of the village built during the 1640s, is in the valley. And from the hillside you see the village there, you see the river, the hills as they are today in the background. In the foreground, standing between the tall pine trees that would have grown on the site in those days, is Father Jean de Brébeuf and an Indian companion of his called Chiwatenwa.
The wooden sculpture was unveiled at a press conference in front of the Canadian National Press, and Ron presented the work to Cardinal Carter of the Archdiocese of Toronto.
Personally, I really feel part of what is going on here. I feel like I know the trees themselves almost. The white pine is one of the most common trees to grow naturally here. The carving's made out of white pine. And we reproduce white pine here in the scene. I've tramped around Martyrs, St. Marie, endless number of times, so I feel like it's close to me. As a matter of fact, I work just down the river. You can follow the river here.
Following completion of the Pope's gift, Ron was commissioned to carve a work that now hangs in the reconstructed Jesuit village known as St. Marie among the Huron. St. Marie is a landmark John Paul requested to visit so that he might pray at the original grave sites of Fathers Jean Brébeuf and Gabriel Lallemont. The Jesuit saints are two of Canada's 8 martyrs. Ron Hunt carved a headstone for the grave where the pontiff paid homage to the Jesuit fathers who strove to bring Christianity to the natives of Canada in the early 1600s.
These priests came to the New World to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ to the native peoples of this land.
The carving, well, I grew with it, or it grew with me, and I think it's a significant piece, particularly to the Pope, because we know that he has a keen interest in the Canadian natives. Of course, he's interested in Father Jean de Brébeuf. We also know that he happens to like the outdoors and like nature. I think all of those reasons put together should make the carving significant to him. I certainly hope it does anyway.
As a postscript to our feature on Catholic schools, we'd like to congratulate West Catholic School for Boys under the direction of the Christian Brothers,
and Mercy Vocational School under the direction of the Sisters of Mercy, both of which were cited by President Reagan as outstanding examples of secondary education in the United States.
Next week on Reel to Reel, we'll return to Fort Dix, New Jersey for part 2 of our feature for God and Country.
We'll meet some youngsters in the 4-H Club.
We'll look at the special apostolate of the McDuff family. And Rosemary Bruno will be along with In the Know. All that and more next week on Reel to Reel.
See you then. Good night.
Good night. And remember, Jesus is Lord.